Hello everyone. Today my topic of my lecture is determinants of voting behavior and the role of populism. As we all know, populism has become a buzzword in Indian politics, not only in India but across the world. We see in Western Europe, whether it is Spain, whether it is Germany, whether it is even in America, Latin America, Brazil, everywhere we see the rise of populism all across the world. Therefore, it is important to understand what populism is all about, what it is, and how it is changing the entire political discourse in across the world. But today, for us, we will discuss the impacts of populism in India. As we all know, with the rise of competitive electoral democracy and the first past the post system, here almost all the political parties, politicians, leaders across different spectrum, they're all interested to influence the voter, and which has become a major issues in contemporary India. The objective of today's lecture is to understand the nature of populism, the concept, the meaning of populism across the world, and the nature of populism and its relationship with politics in India. Populism and populist politics and how its impact on the everyday institutions, functioning of democracy, and how its impact on democratic institutions. Also, we will discuss the different types of populism which is practiced in India, both at the national level as well as various state. The framework of our discussions would be, we will conceptualize the very meanings of populism, the changing paradigm or changing nature of populism, the history of populism in India, and also the rise and growth of populist politics in the pan-Indian scenario. Populism and the patterns of voting behavior, how populism is impacting on the electoral behavior, and how elections is shaping the idea of populism, which is called populism and elections. Populism across different states. We will be taking few examples of southern Indian states like Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh, Karnataka. Maybe we can take a case study of from West Bengal, from the eastern part, West Bengal, a little bit of Bihar, and in North India, in Uttar Pradesh, and country in general. Let us look at what is populism, what is the meaning and concept of populism. Political science across the world, they have defined populism from different point of view, from multiple perspective, from multiple angles. I mean, when you understand, in order to understand populism, we really have to, understand the nature of political economy, the nature of economy at large, and also political consciousness of that particular socio-political space, and how populism is basically influencing the constitutional features, the constitutional principles, as well as the functioning of constitutional institutions. One of the famous scholars, political scientist, Cas Madej, he has defined populism as a thin-centered ideology that considers society to be ultimately separated into homogeneous and antagonistic camps. Therefore, there is a us versus them kind of debate, and also he further explained that populism isn't just a rabble-rousing demagoguery, it's a kind of parasite, a simple set of ideas that can feed off either left or right-wing populism. Incidentally, there turned out to be good explanation for populism, why the term has proved so difficult to define. I mean, it is easy to say, but it is very hard to define what populism actually it is. Cas Madej, he's also argued that populism also show authoritarian lineages, approving strong and charismatic leadership, which expenses the voices of people without caring the functioning of democratic institutions. That means there is a slight possibility of turning populism or populist politics or popular leaders towards a sort of one man centric or one person centric personified kind of a political debate, which is maybe normative sense is not good for the functioning of democracy. Often we confuse, this is a very common thing, often we confuse populism with sort of an dole politics, that politics of giving. In dole politics and populism, there's a thin differences, and also in how populism is basically displacing or basically eroding the right based popular people's struggle. I mean, if you look at the history of India, we have seen the agrarian revolutions, the Kisan agitations, the agitations from the below, Dalits, Adivasis, OBCs, they're all struggling for rights and right-based approaches. That we can't call that as an populism. Therefore, there is a thin difference between the populism and dole politics. As I already told you, Casmaday's definition of populism, and there's also a very famous political scientist, Albertazzi and MacDonald. They defined populism as an ideology that pits a virtuous and homogeneous people against a set of elites and dangerous others who are together depicted as deprived of sovereign people of their rights, values and identity and voice. Defining populism only from an elite perspective is also not a right way to understand the nature, meaning of populism. Well, there are multiple types of populism we see all across the world. India is also not exceptions. There are multiple varieties of populism, as according to European Union funded project institute called Demos. And Demos, they are saying there are 4 types of populism which exist in Europe, and I argue that is also there in South Asia as well. And Europe, right-wing populism, there is a radical left-wing populism, there are illiberal populism, and the last one is anti-establishment populism. Professor Ali Agrara from University at Chicago also classified populism into 3 broad categories. One is economic populism, the political populism and the cultural populism. Economic populism largely involves pursuing of socio-political economic policies that transfer resources from wealthy to middle class or lower income groups that are initially popular, but with the public, because for the most people the benefits exceeds their cost in short run, but in long run the economic populism largely we have seen is in failed because it doesn't generate revenues. Political populism includes dismantling, disregarding and undermining democratic procedure, an attempt to subjugate the institutions so that the checks and balance of the institutions are destroyed. This is an important definition. Like in the wake of populism, what we do generally dismantling the constitutional institutions or democratic institutions which we have built over the times. Cultural populism claims that true people that are the native people, native members of the nation state, and the outsiders can include immigrants, criminals, ethnic and religious minority, and the liberal elites. Cultural populism tend to emphasize religious traditionalism, law and order, sovereignty, and painting migrants and minorities an enemy. This is a quite important aspects of populism because we see an amalgamation of both political and cultural populism in different parts of the world, including India. For India, as a noted political scientist Professor Christoph Jaffelo, he argues in his recent book on the Hindu nationalism and rise of ethnic democracy, with the book which published in 2021, and in that he deployed a new category to understand populism called national populism. Well, the idea of national populism is taken from a German political scientist, but he is deploying that category, that how national populism in India with the rise of Narendra Modi and the entire development model, Vikas model, and how this model is basically creating a new kind of national populism. And over the last 2 decades, we have seen under the leadership of Narendra Modi, Hindu nationalism has been coupled of form of national populism that has ensured electoral success, both first in Gujarat and later on and all across India. Narendra Modi managed to seduce a substantial number of citizens by promising them development, of course polarizing the electorates along with the ethno-religious line. Both facets of national populism found expression in a highly personalized political style, as Modi relayed directly to the voters through all kind of channels of communications in order to saturate public sphere. This is how Professor Jaffelo has argued. Well, in the post-colonial India, after independence has witnessed multiple form of populism, but in the last few decades, the scale, the growth, the mammoth rise of populism has gone through radical transformations. Populism and populist politics have become an important aspects of contemporary political debate, along with the rise of competitive electoral politics. India has been the laboratory for several types of populism and populist political forces that have played significant role in the making and unmaking of Indian politics. As I told you, India being such a vast country with huge diversity in terms of language, religion, culture, urban-rural gap, and all the elements and variables that are available in India. And that's why one uniform, linear, single way of understanding populism won't be helping much to understand the populism in India. In 1960s, in the post-independence era, in the 1960s, we see agrarian populism or the growth of peasant populism, and this is quite interesting. And if you remember that slogan, that time Prime Minister Lal Bahadur Shastri, he gave a slogan called Jai Jawan, Jai Kisan in the wake of the Indo-China, Indo-Pakistan war, and along with Jawan, the issues of Kisan is also an important aspect of politics that time. So that type of slogans or that type of political imaginaries and that of political imaginations is also called agrarian populism, with a sense of militaristic understanding, with a sense of sovereignty, with a sense of territorial integrity that is there. But along with that, you also notice a sense of agrarian populism. And in 60s also we see a rise of peasant populism ideology, which erase the class distinctions and also create an urban-rural divides. Which traditionally called the division between Bharat and India. So this is quite important, and all these things happening in the post-60s after the decline or downfall of the Congress system, the term which coined by Rajni Kothari, Professor Rajni Kothari. With the decline of Congress system, we see a different kind of populism and different kind of politics is started taking place in India, which is non-elite, largely vernacular in nature, coming from the lower strata of society, both in terms of caste and class, and regional forces are largely representing the middle and the lower strata of the society. Noted political scientist Narendra Subramaniam argued that in late 90s onwards, we see people from the lower strata, largely the rural peoples, the Adivasis, the SCs, or the backward caste, that it's coming up, and this is the popular challenger to the Congress party, including forces that foregrounded caste. Like we see the rise of new political parties coming up, post-Mandal phenomena. In 1980s, we see the rise of Mandal Commission's report, and the Mandal Commission's report created a huge hullabaloo in Indian politics, both anti-Mandal politics as well as pro-Mandal politics. And in that process, we see the rise of Bahujan Samaj Party by Kasi Ram. We also see Samajwadi Party coming up, the RJD in Rashtriya Janata Dal in Bihar. The entire of North Indian region, we see an upsurge of a political party, and also in southern parts of India, though historically there was a movement from the backward caste or backward class, we see the DMK, the rise of DMK, re-emergence of DMK, then AIADMK. So that's why you see a cinema politics emerging in the southern India, especially in Tamil Nadu and Andhra Pradesh. Also during Indira Gandhi's time, this is an also important phase to understand populism. Here the populism is a kind of mixture between politics as well as socialism and authoritarianism. In 1970s, India witnessed a new different kind of socialist flavor, as we could recall that the constitutions, in constitutions we see the word secularism and the socialism added into that, and then the influential persona of Mrs. Gandhi, Indira Gandhi, and her leadership, and as we see become the Prime Minister of India. And by combining populism with socialism, Mrs. Gandhi created a new political category called the poor, and the popular slogan called Garibi Hatao, the reduction of poverty, or end of poverty. Then the Garibi Hatao slogan, and then India is Indira. the comparing Indira Gandhi with the state. She herself become the state. In that sense, both the Garibi Hatao and India is Indira, Indira's India, India is Indira. This kind of slogan is basically amalgamated a new kind of authoritarian populism with a sense of socialistic flavor. The popular influential slogans, as I told you, the Garibi Hatao, drive away poverty, played a significant role in the political mobilizations of rural electorates. Though Mrs. Gandhi policy of Garibi Hatao largely recognized as the politics of redistributions and anti-elitists, but her style of politics has eroded the constitutional values, values of democratic institutions. Subsequently, in order to resist Indira Gandhi model of populism, another kind of parochial and religious model of politics have emerged in the political scene of India. We know populism and mobilizations in post-80s after the death of Indira Gandhi, another kind of populist politics which emerged in 1980s onwards. There has been major shift and ruptures in Indian society and politics. The electoral mobilizations based on the issues like Bijli Pani Sadak, electricity, water, roads, to the policy of identity, social justice and the affirmative actions or positive discriminations, or the politics of reservations. The upsurge and assertions of lower caste and region-based identities has posed a major threat to the privileged Brahminical ruling elites. So now this is a churning in Indian politics. Now politics is no longer a Delhi-centric, no longer an elite-centric. Now we see a democratic upsurge, what Professor Yogendra Yadav called it a second democratic upsurge, that in this new politics, the people politics from the below, where the large number of pichde varg, which is called backward class, backward caste, the politics of social justice, politics of representations, they are basically posing threat. This is also a new kind of an populism, but with a different varieties. The process of democratic assertions, we see in India multiple democratic assertions. The process of democratic assertions and democratizations of politics in the post-Mandal phase has basically generated a new political opportunities and new political avenues to politicize caste, to doing caste politics. Here in the popular imaginations, when we think of caste politics, we immediately think of only about the lower caste, which is not the case. I mean, because lower caste group doesn't have any other space or any other place to mobilize, hence it is easy for them to identify or to create a solidarity with the caste lines. Therefore, in order to understand these complexities within the political discourse, just simply calling it a caste politics won't be sufficient or be enough to understand the nature of politics of that time. The neoliberal political market economy, which of course with the rise of sharp group inequalities in India. In the last few decades, we have seen on the other hand the rise of big business houses, but also on the other hand, we see huge numbers of populations which are still, sort of revolving around that poverty, that chronic poverty. So the group inequalities has sharpened with the rise of political aspirations with different social groups, has led to formation of new political blocs in India. Hence, just repeat it again, that with the rise of neoliberal market economy, with the rise of political aspirations, also with the rise of different caste groups, has generated a new political blocks, that I will represent my caste, you will represent your caste. Hence, a new kind of both of politics of recognitions and politics of recognitions. Both recognitions and redistributions has become part of politics in the national level, along with the first past the post system. The kind of model, electoral model we follow in India, the first past the post system, which model itself is which you cannot disengage with any community, because this model is in this model it is not sufficient alone that you mobilize your caste group only. Hence, you require different new political categories or new political concept, so that you can go beyond your caste groups and also influence the voting behavior of the populations. Therefore, it's no longer of 60s and 70s politics or in a kind of an homogeneous politics from New Delhi. Now, in post 90s, we see the fragmentations, we see the rise of different different groups based on based on region, based on caste, based on class, based on ethnicity, based on different identities, even based on different subcaste or jatis. So this new kind of politics which has emerged, and in order to understand this new politics, the old category won't be sufficient enough. Then if we come to the contemporary one, with the rise of BJP and national populism, which I was talking about, and Professor Christophe Jaffelo has defined and extensively written on national populism. In the last one decade or so, with the monumental growth of Bharatiya Janata Party and its massive electoral success or victory in the two consecutive terms in 2014 as well as in 2019, needs a sort of a critical as well as academic engagement. Why all of a sudden a political party which is largely confined to the North India, which is generally called the cow belt, and that from that how that party is basically expanding all across India, whether it is south or whether it is northeast or east or in the West India, of course very much the north and the middle. Here it is under the leadership of Narendra Modi had led to the new phase, has led to a new phase in Indian politics. And in order to understand this new phase, one has to deploy the category of national populism. How this in national populism has really basically helped to create a larger pan-Indian Hindu identity, and how that identity has generated or given sort of dividends to the electoral growth. The BJP in 2014 has projected itself a pan-Indian party with a broader accommodative outlook. It's no longer the populism of no longer the politics of 1990s, which is very much restricted to upper caste, urban or semi-urban upper caste group. It's no longer a Bania party in that sense. Now it has a broader outlook of accommodative outlook, engaging with the question of caste, gender and vernacular ethnic and linguistic identities. The BJP adopted multi-pronged electoral campaign strategy, combining both populist idea of Vikas, development, along with the larger projection of unified pan-Indian Hindu identity. By using the term populism, Jaffelo, like many other political populist leader, Modi also directly relates to emotionally to his people, but he claims to represent 1.3 billion of Indians. In fact, as a spokesperson of called Hindu nationalism, and consider that majority community represent Indian nation. Christians, Muslims may practice the religion privately, but in the public sphere, they have to pay allegiance to the symbols of majoritarian symbols. If populism is not an ideology, as Jaffelo argues, but definitely national populism is one of the important ideology. The style of politics pays electoral dividend, but also generates a new form of polarizing politics and the pan-Hindu mobilizations. BJP has gained huge electoral strength in the new regions of East, Northeast, Southern India, going beyond the typical North Indian, imaginations. Now we are coming to the populism in the different other Indian states like Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, Tamil Nadu, including West Bengal, which is becoming an important aspect. If you look at Tamil Nadu, right from the cinema politics and then how film star turned politicians, they are becoming a chief minister of the state, and how they are inviting new kind of populist politics. Same way in Andhra Pradesh, NTR, NT Ramarao, these are the names which are very influential names in Andhra Pradesh, which started a new kind of cinema and populist politics. For example, in recently, if you look at Jayalalitha's time in Tamil Nadu, Jayalalitha started a lot of new canteens, and Jayalalitha is considered as an Amma, which called Amma, that means mother, and with her motherly sort of an imaginations, she has drafted a lot of schemes, more than a dozens of schemes, welfare schemes like Amma Canteen, which is very famous, and as well as popular. Then the distribution of laptops, baby cradle program in order to engage with the women. So likewise, we see a different kind of populist politics, both in Tamil Nadu and Andhra Pradesh. Now in Andhra Pradesh also, we see different kind of populism, both the combination, a mixture of cinema and politics, along with different popular welfare schemes, the distribution of rice, 2 kilo rice, initiative of different medical initiative, health schemes. All those schemes really played an important role. Also, it generated a new kind of political discussions and debates in Andhra Pradesh. When I'm talking about Andhra Pradesh, I'm talking about United Andhra Pradesh, which Telangana was also part of that. As you know, the film industry of Telugu film industry is a very highly revenue-oriented industry, and how cinema and politics generated new kind of populism, new kind of popular imaginations, popular imaginaries in the electoral domain. Populism in West Bengal, and I would conclude with this populism in West Bengal. Well, West Bengal has witnessed a different kind of political changes. One hand, West Bengal has witnessed radical left politics as a form of Naxalite politics. Later, the 3.5 decades of left front government, which is another kind of a rural agrarian kind of populism. But in last 1 decade, with the rise of Trinamool Congress, with the rise of Mamata Banerjee, which popularly called Didi, elder sister, and in the populist politics is West Bengal has at the peak of populism or popular politics. She has initiated more than 2 dozens of such popular welfare schemes, and right from what is this Kanya Shri, Rupashri, Sastro Sati, Khadyo Sati, right from child birth to the death, there are almost all different schemes which cater the needs of different kind of groups. For example, the Kanyasri scheme, as there are empirical evidences, the Kanyasri schemes has really played a significant role in the political domain in West Bengal, especially in terms of enrollment and enrollment of females in different rural districts of West Bengal. Then the Rupashri scheme, which basically to prevent the early marriages, which also played a quite important role in the politics of West Bengal. Then like Khadyo Sati, Sastro Sati, more recently the schemes called Lakshmi Bhandar, which basically to pay 500 and 1000 rupees to SC, ST and unreserved general caste female head of the family. These schemes played a very important role, been playing a role, and as psephologists and scholars, those who have done empirical studies, they have argued that this populist schemes has enormously contributed Mamata Banerjee to retain her social base in spite of huge allegations of scams, corruptions and factionalism within party. And also Mamata Banerjee secured the 3rd term in West Bengal with a thumping majority in assembly elections using the category of populism and all those welfare schemes. Whether it is good or bad, that I am not right now going to that debate, but this populist politics really pay in a sense like it influence the voting behavior, it influence the mind of voters when they go and cast their votes. To conclude that populism and populist politics have become a regular and institutionalized manner of engagement with the mainstream politics. Earlier, populism used to be considered as a sort of not as a mainstream politics, but now populism itself become a mainstream political categories, mainstream political issues of discussions. Almost all politicians, government are in a rat race to compete for a competitive politics and politics to garner or for the electoral gains, which also influence the voting behavior. In doing so, in doing this populist politics, we see a distinctions between dole politics and completely eroded the populist politics and the dole politics come and almost completely eroded the constitutional values of democracy, social justice, substantial equality have taken the back seats. This has resulted the growing inequalities, group inequalities, marginalizations, growing inequalities, marginalizations of public institutions, whether it is quality healthcare system, quality public education system, poor civic engagement and rampant unemployment and also weakening of democratic discourse. This is quite important, how populist politics or populist measure or populist welfare schemes, quote unquote welfare scheme, how this scheme basically eroding the basic constitutional values and functioning of institutions. As Dr. Ambedkar emphasized that this cautions is far necessary in the case of India, and he said that bhakti in religion may be lead to the road of salvation of the soul, but in politics, bhakti or hero worshipping is a road to inevitable degradations and eventually dictatorship. With this, thanks again.